Hey guys, tonight we're diving headfirst into a paradox. A beautiful what if that could genuinely reshape every single step humanity has ever taken. Imagine, if you will, the bustling, sun-drenched docks of ancient Alexandria, the scent of papyrus, and the murmur of 1,000 languages carried on the sea breeze. You're standing on the legendary grounds of the Great Library, not as a tourist in some crumbling ruin, but as a living, breathing patron, surrounded by towering shelves of knowledge, stretching further than the eye can see, whispering secrets from millennia past. This isn't a dusty museum. It's a vibrant, ever-expanding universe of thought. Now, hold that image close, because you probably won't survive this journey unscathed. Mentally, at least. The sheer weight of what we're about to unpack might just make your brain do a little somersault. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. It always blows my mind to think of us all connecting across time zones. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Tonight, we step into a world where the Library of Alexandria, that ancient beacon of knowledge, never truly falls. You know the story in our timeline, right? The fires, the sieges, the gradual decline, the what-if of what was truly lost. It's a well-established historical fact that Julius Caesar's siege of Alexandria in 48 BC caused a significant fire, destroying parts of the library's collection, though the full extent is still a subject of scholarly debate. But in this timeline, you breathe a sigh of relief. You're there, perhaps a young Alexandrian citizen or a visiting Roman scribe, watching as the flames that lick at the docks during Caesar's desperate standoff are contained. The wind shifts, a timely downpour miraculously dampens the surrounding structures. Or perhaps the library's innovative fire brigade, a newly implemented public service, ironically inspired by a recently deciphered Phoenician text on water management, spring into action with unprecedented efficiency. Regardless of the exact mechanism, the heart of human knowledge beats on. The immediate aftermath isn't a scene of smouldering ruins and despair, but one of triumphant preservation. The Roman legions, initially eyeing Alexandria's wealth and strategic position, find themselves staring at something far more valuable than gold, an intact, living repository of every known thought. Instead of merely absorbing the remnants of Greek culture through conquest and piecemeal translation, the Roman Empire now encounters an intellectual powerhouse, fully operational, its vast halls still echoing with debate and discovery. You see, Roman scholars, initially dismissive, slowly become mesmerized. They arrive not as conquerors, but as eager students. Imagine a young Roman senator, perhaps a relative of the eloquent Cicero, arriving at Alexandria. He expects to see a city brought to its knees, but instead he finds philosophers still debating the atomic theory of Democritus, astronomers charting stars with refined instruments, and engineers drawing up schematics for devices that defy the conventional wisdom of his time. It's a bit like someone from the 18th century stumbling upon the internet, a complete paradigm shift. This isn't merely preservation, it's a profound cultural transfusion. The pragmatic, engineering-focused Romans, in our timeline, were geniuses at application, but often less inclined towards abstract theoretical science or philosophical speculation. Here, they are continually exposed to it. You witness emperors like Augustus, who in our world commissioned great building projects and patronised the arts, becoming genuine intellectual patrons of the library. They don't just fund new wings, they fund research expeditions, send scribes to distant lands to acquire more texts, and invest in the library's digitisation efforts, meaning legions of scribes meticulously copying and cross-referencing scrolls, creating indexes and catalogues with a rigour that would make a modern librarian weep with joy and maybe a little jealousy. They even develop an early, highly specialised form of peer review for new works, overseen by a council of venerable scholars who take their jobs very seriously. I mean, you try getting a philosophical treatise past old Aristarchus. The man once sent a scribe into a week-long existential crisis just by critiquing his use of the conditional tense. Think of the sheer volume of knowledge that, in our reality, vanished into the sands of time. Thousands of lost plays by Aeschylus or Sophocles, complete philosophical treatises by Epicurus that redefine pleasure, medical texts detailing surgical procedures centuries ahead of their time, astronomical charts predicting eclipses with unnerving accuracy, and engineering blueprints for devices that would astound you. Here, they endure. Imagine having access to the complete works of all the pre-Socratic philosophers, not just fragments. You might find a book on ancient Egyptian theories of sleep cycles, or perhaps a rather niche collection dedicated to the precise weight of a crocodile's tear. For scientific purposes, of course, not just morbid curiosity. The library, in this timeline, functions less as a dusty archive and more as a dynamic research institution. Its scholars aren't just custodians, they are active contributors. Euclid's Elements isn't just copied, it's continually updated and expanded upon by Roman geometers who apply its principles to the construction of aqueducts and amphitheatres with unprecedented efficiency. Archimedes' theoretical work on levers and hydrostatics leads directly to the development of sophisticated automated devices and immensely powerful cranes, revolutionizing Roman construction. You might even see the rudimentary beginnings of a steam-powered pump in 100 AD, not yet a locomotive, mind you, but definitely a much more efficient way to empty a flooded mine or lift heavy stones for a colossal statue of Emperor Hadrian. This continuous stream of knowledge reshapes the very fabric of Roman society. Their administrative efficiency skyrockets. Instead of simply building roads and conquering territories, they are now doing so with a scientific precision previously unimaginable. Urban planning becomes an applied science, not just an art. Public health sees remarkable, if still rudimentary, advancements as medical knowledge from Egyptian and Greek traditions is preserved and cross-referenced. The typical Roman citizen, perhaps unknowingly, benefits from a longer, healthier, and more structured life simply because the accumulated wisdom of millennia is not just stored, but actively used and grown. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of this unbroken knowledge chain, even in our own timeline, wondering if humanity would have always found these paths eventually. But here, the eventually becomes now, and the ripple effects are already beginning to spread across the vast Roman Empire, hinting at a future far more advanced, far sooner than you could possibly imagine. You notice a subtle, yet profound, shift in the very atmosphere of Rome. It's no longer just a city of iron-willed conquerors and pragmatic engineers. It's becoming a hub of calculated innovation, a sort of ancient Silicon Valley, if you will, but with less kombucha and more toga parties. The Roman elite, initially sceptical or merely curious, are now sending their brightest scions not just to military academies or rhetoric schools, but to Alexandria. They return with minds buzzing with new ideas, not just about how to build a better catapult, but how to design an entire city to maximise public health and civic engagement. It is a known historical fact that Roman engineering was already incredibly advanced, capable of constructing impressive aqueducts, roads, and monumental buildings like the Pantheon. But here, this innate Roman genius for application is supercharged by access to theoretical frameworks and experimental data that would otherwise have taken centuries to rediscover, if at all. Imagine walking through a Roman city in this new timeline, say Ostia Antiqua, the port of Rome. Instead of the typical labyrinthine streets, you observe a meticulously planned urban landscape. The sewers, which were already a Roman fort, are now integrated with advanced water filtration systems, perhaps inspired by Alexandrian studies of ancient Babylonian water purification techniques. You might even glimpse early forms of public fountains that not only dispense clean water but also have rudimentary pressure regulation, ensuring a steady flow throughout the day. It's not just about grand structures, it's about micro improvements that enhance daily life. Picture public baths not just as places of hygiene, but as self-cleaning marvels with internal currents and filtration methods that would make a modern spa owner green with envy. Maybe they even have early versions of geothermal heating systems long before their time. The military, predictably, is among the first to adopt these new technologies with gusto. Roman legions, already the most formidable fighting force of their era, now deploy not just improved siege engines, but early mechanical reconnaissance drones. Small, clockwork-driven birds that can be launched to observe enemy positions from above, their movements guided by intricate spring mechanisms. These aren't remote-controlled, mind you, but more like pre-programmed aerial scouts. The sight of these metal birds soaring overhead would have been absolutely terrifying to any barbarian horde. And when they do engage, you see Roman engineers deploying portable bridges assembled with such precision that they can be erected in a fraction of the time, or constructing fortified camps with astonishing speed thanks to prefabricated components and advanced surveying techniques. One quirky tidbit: some Alexandrian texts describe a theoretical wind-powered boat that could sail against the current, a concept scoffed at in our timeline as pure fantasy. Here, Roman naval engineers, armed with a deeper understanding of aerodynamics and propulsion, are actually experimenting with rudimentary versions for river transport, perhaps not yet achieving true upwind sailing, but definitely getting a serious speed boost. Governance, too, sees a tangible evolution. The Roman census, already a remarkably detailed demographic tool, becomes even more sophisticated. With mathematical methods gleaned from Alexandrian statisticians, they can predict agricultural yields with greater accuracy, optimize taxation collection, and even forecast population shifts years in advance. This allows for a more stable, less reactive administration. Public works projects aren't just decided by imperial whim, they are meticulously planned based on detailed cost-benefit analyses and projected long-term impact on the populace. You witness Roman politicians debating not just rhetoric, but the economic efficiency of building a new road versus a new aqueduct, backed by reams of data. It's almost unsettlingly modern, isn't it? Think about the implications for commerce. Advanced cartography, drawing on Alexandrian astronomical observations, means trade routes are charted with greater precision, reducing journey times and risks. Merchants can plan their voyages more effectively, leading to an explosion of interprovincial trade. You might find standardized units of measurement and quality controlled, ensuring that a barrel of olive oil from Hispania is exactly the same volume and purity as one from Africa. This fosters greater trust in trade and streamlines the empire's vast economic network. It sounds terribly boring, I know, but imagine the chaos if your phone charger was different for every city you visited. This symbiotic relationship between Roman practicality and Alexandrian theory creates a feedback loop of innovation. The Romans, in their relentless pursuit of efficiency and conquest, provide the resources and the testing ground for the library's theoretical advancements. The library, in turn, provides the intellectual tools to make the Roman Empire run even smoother, allowing it to expand and maintain its vast territories with unprecedented stability. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of this kind of top-down, centralised knowledge application, even in our own timeline, wondering if it stifles individual creativity in favour of systemic efficiency. But here, the efficiency is undeniably impressive. You see public forums where even common citizens can access simplified versions of these new administrative tools, perhaps through interactive maps carved into stone tablets that show local tax rates or public work schedules. It's like an ancient stone-carved version of Google Maps, but you have to walk over to it. A bit less convenient than your phone, but quite revolutionary for 200 AD. The architectural landscape undergoes a silent revolution. Structures are not just bigger, they are smarter. Bridges span wider chasms with fewer supports. Buildings rise taller and stronger. And roads are built with materials and techniques that minimise erosion and wear, lasting for centuries longer than their counterparts in our timeline. You might observe a Roman architect poring over a scroll, not just with traditional designs, but with mathematical stress calculations and material science data that allows them to build lighter, yet more durable structures. This isn't just about making things stronger, it's about making them better, optimizing every resource. The sheer speed of construction is breathtaking. A major temple or public bath complex might be completed in a fraction of the time our timeline's Romans took, thanks to a combination of advanced tooling and precise planning. It's like they discovered prefabrication centuries ahead of schedule, reducing construction to an assembly line minus the actual line, and certainly minus the robotic arms. Though to be fair, they might have invented a few of those too. You watch as the Western Roman Empire still fragments, as empires are wont to do, for even the most brilliant civilizations are not immune to internal strife and external pressures. But this time, the collapse isn't a sharp, sudden plummet into a dark age, but rather a more gradual, cushioned descent, softened by the enduring intellectual beacon of Alexandria. It is an established historical fact that after the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476 AD, much of the classical learning and infrastructure declined in Western Europe, leading to what historians sometimes call the Dark Ages, a period characterized by reduced literacy and centralized governance. But here, the light never truly dims. Imagine travelling through what we call the Dark Ages in our timeline, say, through Gaul or Britannia in the 6th century. Instead of isolated pockets of monastic learning desperately clinging to crumbling scrolls, you find flourishing centres where Alexandrian texts are actively being translated, debated, and even expanded upon. The monasteries in this world are not just dusty repositories, they are vibrant research hubs. Monks, instead of merely copying biblical texts, are also meticulously reproducing treatises on engineering, medicine, and philosophy, sending them via established trade routes to nascent kingdoms across Europe. You might observe a Benedictine monk, cowl pulled low, not just illuminating a gospel, but sketching a complex gear mechanism based on a recently arrived Alexandrian treatise on pneumatics. He's probably muttering about the sheer inefficiency of traditional water mills, trying to optimize output while simultaneously trying to remember where he left his quill. The concept of a universal knowledge, fostered by centuries of Alexandrian scholarship and Roman dissemination, means that even the barbarian kingdoms, which in our timeline often caused massive destruction, are quickly exposed to and even integrated into this intellectual framework. The Visigoths, the Franks, the Lombards, they arrive not just to plunder, but to inherit. Their leaders, perhaps initially seeking only the practical benefits of Roman roads and siege engines, soon grasp the immense value of the knowledge itself. They established their own royal academies, inviting Alexandrian scholars to teach the children of their nobility, not just Latin and Greek, but also mathematics, astronomy, and advanced agriculture. A chieftain might insist on a new aqueduct for his burgeoning capital, having seen the benefits described in a translated Roman engineering text. It's a bit like giving a conqueror a smartphone. They might smash it at first, but once they see how much easier it makes their life, they become quite attached. What might have been lost in our timeline, thousands of scientific texts, medical observations, nuanced legal theories, and even sophisticated philosophical arguments, remains in common circulation here. This means there's a sustained intellectual momentum. Consider the emergence of early medieval universities. In our timeline, they slowly coalesced around the 11th and 12th centuries, often built on rediscovered classical texts, many of which had been preserved in the Islamic world. Here, with a continuous flow of knowledge from Alexandria, these institutions bloom much earlier, perhaps by the 7th or 8th century, with curricula that are broad, deeply scientific, and globally informed from their inception. They aren't just teaching theology and rhetoric, they're teaching applied mechanics, advanced geometry, and empirical medicine. This uninterrupted progress means that the technological and societal innovations we associate with later periods arrive centuries ahead of schedule. Instead of just preserving Aristotle, scholars are developing new forms of logic and applying advanced physics to things like water wheels, windmills, and even rudimentary forms of complex machinery for agriculture. You might see sophisticated irrigation systems in place by 800 AD, or vastly improved ploughs that revolutionize farming techniques, significantly increasing food yields and supporting larger populations. This in turn reduces famine and allows for more specialized labor, further accelerating innovation. One quirky or fringe tidbit. Imagine monastic breweries not just perfecting ale, but applying advanced Alexandrian chemistry to refine fermentation processes. They might not just improve their beer, they could accidentally discover early forms of distillation centuries ahead of schedule while trying to purify water for medicinal tinctures. Your average monk might be a brilliant, if somewhat eccentric, chemist, pondering the volatile compounds of spirits while trying to perfect his latest batch of contemplative lager. This monastic science becomes a surprising source of early technological advancement, much like the alchemists of our timeline, but with better funding and more actual, tangible results. Public health, which took a massive hit during the Dark Ages in our reality, continues its slow, steady improvement. Basic sanitation principles, advanced understanding of water purity, remember that Alexandrian water management, and early attempts at antiseptic practices, once confined to scattered texts, are now widely disseminated. While they certainly don't have modern medicine, you might see basic surgical instruments far more refined, or a widespread understanding of the importance of washing hands before assisting childbirth, something that didn't become common until the 19th century in our world. This means lower infant mortality and a higher average lifespan for the common person. A subtle but revolutionary change. Some scholars debate whether the Dark Ages were truly as dark as often depicted, arguing for continuous, albeit decentralized, innovation even in our own timeline. In this hypothetical timeline, that debate wouldn't even exist. The light of knowledge, maintained and amplified by Alexandria, never truly flickered. You perceive a palpable difference in the air, a sense of shared intellectual pursuit that prevents the fracturing of thought. Learning is seen not as a luxury for the few, but as a practical necessity for societal advancement. This collective wisdom acts as a bulwark against the forces of decay, fostering a more interconnected, curious, and continuously developing European landscape, preparing it for an entirely different kind of future. As you journey forward in this divergent timeline, the intellectual momentum continues, unabated. The 7th century dawns, and with it, a new cultural and intellectual force emerges from the Arabian Peninsula, Islam. In our own timeline, the nascent Islamic caliphates, with their immense hunger for knowledge, would embark on a monumental translation movement, seeking out and preserving Greek, Persian, and Indian texts that had largely been lost to Western Europe. It is an established historical fact that the Islamic Golden Age, particularly through institutions like the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, played a crucial role in preserving and advancing classical knowledge, much of which was then reintroduced to Europe centuries later. But here, the landscape is profoundly different. Imagine the astonishment of early Islamic scholars as they expand their reach, not just into conquered lands, but into a truly vibrant intellectual superpower, Alexandria. They don't find a dying ember of ancient wisdom, but a roaring bonfire. The library isn't a mere collection of dusty scrolls. It's a living university, a thriving research institution with scholars from every corner of the known world, debating in Greek, Latin, Aramaic, and now, increasingly Arabic. This isn't a rediscovery. It's an immediate, direct engagement. The initial encounters are of course complex. You can imagine the occasional cultural misunderstanding. Perhaps a stern imam trying to explain the finer points of Quranic jurisprudence to a Greek philosopher who keeps quoting Plato, and wondering if this Allah fellow has any interesting paradoxes up his sleeve. But quickly, common ground is found in the shared pursuit of knowledge. The Islamic world's passion for mathematics, astronomy, and medicine finds an immediate, colossal wellspring in Alexandria. Instead of a slow, laborious process of translation and assimilation, there's a rapid, symbiotic exchange. Arabic scholars, with their deep understanding of Indian numeral systems, the ones we now call Arabic numerals funnily enough, bring a powerful tool for computation. Alexandrian mathematicians, already skilled in geometry and theoretical calculations, now have a more efficient numerical language to work with. The result? Algebra, algorithms, and advanced trigonometry develop at an astonishing pace, leading to breakthroughs in fields from architecture to navigation. You see a true intellectual melting pot forming. Instead of Arabic scholars primarily translating Greek texts into Arabic, you have trilingual scholars in Alexandria translating Arabic texts into Greek and Latin, and vice versa. It's like a simultaneous global release of all knowledge in every language at once. This multi-directional flow of ideas creates a truly global intellectual currency. The House of Wisdom in Baghdad, while still a major centre, becomes a sister institution to Alexandria, perhaps even a branch campus, sending its brightest minds to collaborate and learn directly from the source. This ensures that new Islamic discoveries, such as in optics or early chemistry, are immediately integrated into the Alexandrian corpus, and Alexandrian insights in turn influence new Arabic thought. Consider the field of medicine. In our timeline, Islamic physicians like Ibn Sina, Avicenna, made monumental contributions, often building upon rediscovered Greek works. Here, with direct access to all of Galen's known works, plus the vast medical knowledge from ancient Egypt and even early Roman public health records, the advancements are staggering. You might witness early forms of inoculation being experimented with against smallpox centuries before Edward Jenner, inspired by observations of immunity documented in ancient Egyptian papyri. Or perhaps a deeper understanding of anatomy, stemming from more precise surgical accounts from ancient Alexandria, leading to far more effective treatments for common ailments. Imagine a surgeon in 900 AD discussing nerve pathways with a detail that would shock a European doctor from 1700 AD. One quirky tidbit you might encounter. Alexandrian scholars, in collaboration with Arabic astronomers, develop incredibly precise astronomical instruments, not just for charting stars, but for predicting tides with astonishing accuracy. They might even use these to inform long-distance trade, or perhaps to design ingenious coastal defences that automatically adjust to tidal shifts. Imagine a Roman lighthouse, still standing in 1000 AD, not just with a beacon, but with a complex series of cogs and levers powered by tidal energy that warns ships of unusually high or low tides. The local fishermen, of course, just call it the smart lighthouse and assume it's magic. Philosophically, the fusion is equally profound. Islamic philosophers, grappling with the reconciliation of faith and reason, find an entire library of nuanced Greek and Roman philosophical thought at their fingertips, not just the selective translations that reach them in our timeline. Debates on metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology are far richer, drawing from a broader historical and cultural context. This leads to the emergence of philosophical schools that bridge Eastern and Western thought in ways that simply didn't happen in our history. Some scholars debate whether this continuous flow of intellectual capital would ultimately lead to a more monolithic global culture, or a more diverse one, even in our own timeline, wondering if intellectual bottlenecks sometimes force creative, divergent thinking. But here, the immediate effect is an explosion of new ideas, cross-pollination at an unprecedented scale. The influence on mathematics is perhaps the most striking. The combination of Greek geometry, Indian numerals, and Arabic algebraic methods leads to a rapid advancement in pure mathematics, providing the foundational tools for future scientific and technological revolutions. Concepts like zero, negative numbers, and positional notation are quickly adopted and integrated into a unified mathematical framework. You see astronomers using early versions of calculus-like methods to predict planetary movements with astounding precision, and engineers calculating structural loads for monumental buildings using equations that look almost familiar to a modern eye. The Alexandrian library, instead of fading, becomes a testament to intellectual resilience and adaptability. A true global hub of knowledge that transcends empires and creeds. It's a place where a Nestorian Christian scholar might debate the nuances of Aristotelian logic with a Jewish rabbi and a Muslim astronomer, all while a Buddhist monk from India quietly translates a newly arrived Sanskrit text on metallurgy. The collective human intellect, instead of suffering devastating setbacks and rediscoveries, marches forward with an almost frighteningly consistent pace. You feel the intellectual currents of this new world intensifying, swirling together like a magnificent river, where Roman pragmatism, Alexandrian theoretical depth, and Islamic empirical rigour converge. This isn't just about preserving old knowledge, it's about actively using it, refining it, and building upon it in a continuous, deliberate fashion. This intellectual alchemy leads to something profoundly transformative, the premature, yet incredibly robust birth of the scientific method as we understand it. It is an established historical fact that while elements of empirical observation existed in ancient Greek philosophy and Islamic scholarship, like Ibn al-Haytham's work in optics, the systematic, formalized methodology of hypothesis, experiment, and reproducible results only fully coalesced much later in our timeline during the European Renaissance and Enlightenment. Here, it's already the standard operating procedure. Imagine walking into a laboratory in Alexandria in the 10th century. It doesn't look quite like a modern lab, no sterile white benches, but the air hums with purpose. You might see a scholar, perhaps a student of the renowned Abbasid polymath al-Biruni, meticulously weighing substances on a balance so precise it would put some medieval European scales to shame. Nearby, another is observing the trajectory of projectiles, not just drawing conclusions, but recording multiple trials, varying angles, and documenting environmental factors like wind speed. It's like they're doing ancient ballistics research, but with chalkboards and clay tablets instead of supercomputers. The aroma of strange compounds, herbal distillates perhaps, or early chemical reagents, mixes with the faint scent of ink and aged papyrus. It smells a bit like a very serious, very old-school chemistry class, probably with fewer explosions, which is always a bonus. This systematic approach isn't just for theoretical inquiries. It's deeply embedded in practical applications. Think about the field of optics, with al-Haytham's foundational work on light and vision, refined by Alexandrian mathematicians. They don't just theorize about how the eye works. They build precise models, conduct experiments with lenses and mirrors, and chart the path of light rays with uncanny accuracy. This leads to the early development of magnifying glasses, far superior to anything seen in our timeline, aiding scribes, cartographers, and even artisans. And maybe, just maybe, They're experimenting with primitive telescopes or microscopes centuries early, not just for stargazing, but for observing the unseen world. Imagine a physician in 1100 AD peering through a crude microscope, trying to understand what makes people sick, and thinking, there's a little wobbly thing in there. How peculiar. This rigorous approach to evidence extends to all fields. Medical diagnosis, for instance, isn't just about humours and guesswork. Alexandrian physicians, benefiting from an unbroken chain of anatomical knowledge and extensive case studies, conduct meticulous patient observations, tracking symptoms, responses to treatments, and even performing detailed autopsies. A quirky tidbit, some scholars from this era become obsessed with studying the migratory patterns of blood vessels, trying to map the circulatory system with unparalleled detail, sometimes by injecting dyes derived from plant extracts into fresh cadavers. Not a pleasant job, but someone had to do it for science. This leads to a deeper understanding of disease progression, more effective herbal remedies, and even surprisingly sophisticated surgical techniques, like procedures to mend broken bones with external splints and internal pins, using materials refined by early metallurgy. The concept of reproducibility is also paramount. Scholars don't just publish their findings, they publish their methods, their experimental setups, inviting others to replicate their results. This fosters a self-correcting intellectual environment. If your experiment couldn't be replicated by a dozen other scholars, your theory was dismissed faster than a Roman senator caught in a scandal. This rigorous peer review system, formalized within the library's extensive network, prevents the perpetuation of flawed ideas and accelerates the path to verifiable truths. It's basically an ancient version of GitHub, but for scientific papers, where everyone can check your code. One of the greatest benefits of this accelerated scientific method is the debunking of long-held myths. Take alchemy, for instance. In our timeline, it was a mix of mysticism and chemistry, often chasing the elusive philosopher's stone. Here, while the pursuit of turning lead into gold might still be a fringe curiosity, the rigorous experimentation demanded by the Alexandrian Islamic scientific tradition quickly isolates the practical chemical processes from the magical thinking. Alchemists, forced to demonstrate reproducible results, either transition into true chemists, focusing on distillation, purification, and the properties of elements, or fade into obscurity. You see breakthroughs in the production of new dyes, stronger cements, and early forms of explosives. Though thankfully, they're probably not experimenting with those too widely yet. Imagine the library bill for explosion cleanup. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of centralizing such intellectual power, even in our own timeline, wondering if it can stifle truly radical outlier discoveries that might emerge from more independent, less structured environments. But in this world, the sheer volume of minds collaborating and the systematic nature of their inquiry seems to outweigh any potential drawbacks. The accumulation of knowledge isn't just steady, it's exponential. Every generation stands on the shoulders of giants, but those giants are much taller, and their shoulders are remarkably well documented and cross-referenced. The path to understanding the natural world in this timeline is clearer, brighter, and moving at an astonishing clip. You can practically hear the collective aha moments echoing through the centuries. The rigorous application of the scientific method, which you saw taking root in the previous centuries, now yields some of its most profound and immediate benefit in the realm of human health. With an unbroken chain of medical texts, from the detailed observations of ancient Egyptian physicians to the groundbreaking anatomical studies of Herophilus and Erasistratus in the original Library of Alexandria, and now fused with the empirical zeal of Islamic medicine, the human body is no longer a mystery wrapped in superstition. It is an established historical fact that in our timeline, despite significant contributions from Greek and Roman medicine, detailed anatomical knowledge often relied on animal dissection, and human dissection faced religious and societal restrictions, delaying significant progress for centuries until the Renaissance. Here, however, the continuous intellectual exchange facilitated by Alexandria ensures that the pursuit of understanding human anatomy, though still sometimes controversial, progresses steadily. Imagine entering a teaching hospital in, say, 12th century Cairo, an outpost of Alexandrian medical science. It's nothing like a sterile modern facility, perhaps more like a bustling marketplace for ailments, but the underlying principles are astonishingly advanced. You might see physicians meticulously performing dissections on cadavers, openly and with clear purpose, not in secret, but as a core part of medical education. They are not just identifying organs, they are tracing nerve pathways, understanding the intricate web of veins and arteries, and observing the effects of various conditions on different tissues. The anatomical drawings you see on the walls are incredibly detailed, far beyond anything Leonardo da Vinci would sketch in our timeline. They're like ancient, hand-drawn medical atlases, full of precision. One quirky tidbit: some of these doctors, perhaps inspired by Alexandrian clockwork mechanisms, even experiment with creating incredibly intricate moving models of organs, complete with simulated blood flow using coloured liquids to teach their students. It's like an ancient, gruesome, but highly effective biology class diorama. This deeper anatomical understanding, combined with the observational rigour of the scientific method, leads directly to advancements in surgery. Physicians are performing complex operations with a higher success rate, setting compound fractures with internal pinning, repairing hernias with greater skill, and even attempting basic neurosurgery, understanding the skull's structure and the brain's delicate nature to a degree previously unimagined. They might be using refined steel instruments, produced through advanced metallurgical techniques that are also centuries ahead of schedule. While pain management is still rudimentary by modern standards, a bit of opium here, a strong drink there, the understanding of sterility, though not yet full germ theory, is significantly improved. Think about public health. The principles of contagion, understood in rudimentary forms in ancient societies, are now subject to systematic study. Scholars are observing patterns of disease spread, connecting outbreaks to contaminated water sources, stagnant air, or unhygienic practices. While they don't have microscopes to see bacteria, they understand the effect of invisible influences. You might see public health ordinances being enforced in large cities across the Mediterranean and beyond. Mandatory cleaning of public spaces, regulated disposal of waste, and highly advanced aqueducts and sewer systems. Remember the Roman improvements from Section 2? That prevent the spread of waterborne diseases. Imagine public health officials in 1300 AD inspecting food markets, not just for freshness, but for adherence to basic hygiene rules. Perhaps even having a rudimentary understanding of cross-contamination. This means that major plagues, while not entirely eradicated, are often contained more effectively. The Black Death, for instance, in this timeline might still cause devastation, but its impact is lessened. Cities with superior sanitation, better fed populations, and physicians with a more scientific understanding of disease transmission are far more resilient. You witness dedicated quarantine measures, not just random isolation, but protocols developed through observation and data collection. The idea that miasma causes disease slowly gives way to the understanding that something unseen is carried by people or objects, even if the precise nature of that something is still unknown. The impact on individual lifespans is profound. Infant mortality rates, often devastatingly high in our own history, are significantly reduced due to improved midwifery practices, a better understanding of maternal health, and basic hygiene. Childhood diseases are less fatal. The average lifespan for the common person, while still short by modern standards, is noticeably extended. More people survive to old age, leading to a richer society with more experienced elders and a longer period for individual contribution. This also means that the intellectual output of society increases exponentially, as brilliant minds have more time to learn, to innovate, and to teach. One light joke: you might encounter a well-meaning but slightly exasperated Alexandrian physician trying to explain to a stubborn patient that, no, applying mashed unicorn horn to his wound will not help, but a good scrub with soap and water will. The patient, of course, insists the unicorn horn worked wonders for his aunt's hangnail. Old habits die hard, even with centuries of scientific advancement. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of improved health on societal evolution, even in our own timeline, wondering if longer lifespans might have slowed the pace of innovation by perpetuating older generations in positions of power, or if it simply provided more opportunities for accumulated wisdom. Here, the constant flow of new knowledge and the rigorous scientific method seem to keep things dynamic. The sheer volume of people surviving to contribute means that even if a few old grumps hold on to power, there are plenty of new minds eager to prove them wrong with empirical data. This world doesn't just know more, it lives more, experiences more, and critically learns more, building upon an increasingly vast and complex body of medical wisdom. It's like humanity has finally gotten a head start on understanding itself, and the implications are, quite literally, life-changing. As you continue to observe this evolving timeline, the practical applications of continuous knowledge and the formalized scientific method move beyond just saving lives. They begin to reshape the very landscape of daily existence. You've seen how medical advancements lengthen lifespans and make cities healthier. But now you're witnessing technology leapfrogging centuries ahead, transforming the material world in ways that would utterly bewilder your timeline's inhabitants. It is an established historical fact that ancient Roman concrete, or opus cementicum, was remarkably durable, capable of withstanding millennia, thanks in part to its volcanic ash content, which allowed for hydraulic setting even underwater. Here, however, that already impressive material is just a starting point. Imagine walking through a bustling ancient city in this era, perhaps a newly developed port city on the North African coast, sometime around 1400 AD. The buildings aren't just grand, they're smart. You see multi-storey structures of reinforced concrete, not just relying on sheer mass, but utilising internal metal frameworks. a concept perfected centuries ago by Alexandrian engineers who systematically studied load-bearing capacities and stress distribution. These aren't crude rebar. They're high tensile alloys developed through sophisticated metallurgical techniques born from the rigorous empirical studies of Alexandrian and Islamic alchemists, who, as you recall, became actual chemists in this timeline, much to the chagrin of anyone hoping for a lead to gold miracle. The roads are perfectly paved, not just with Roman precision, but with layered compositions that prevent cracks and potholes for centuries, thanks to advanced understanding of material fatigue and geological stability. You might even spot early forms of self-cleaning street gutters using automated water flow systems, driven by water pressure from elevated aqueducts. No more street sweepers, just very confused pigeons. The most striking change, however, is the prevalence of sophisticated mechanical devices. The theoretical work of Hero of Alexandria, which in our timeline was largely relegated to novelty inventions like steam-powered spinning toys, is now fully actualized and commercialized. You see public fountains that don't just spout water, but feature intricate, clockwork-driven automatons that perform little shows on the hour. Perhaps a bronze eagle that flaps its wings and drinks from a basin, or miniature figures that dance in synchronized patterns. These aren't just toys, they're testaments to a widespread understanding of gears, levers, pneumatics, and hydraulics. Beyond public entertainment, these automated mechanisms are integrated into industry and infrastructure. Imagine automated looms in textile workshops, producing fabric far faster and with greater consistency than hand weaving. Or agricultural machinery powered by water wheels, or even early rudimentary wind turbines that can till fields, sow seeds, or even harvest crops with a fraction of the human labour previously required. These aren't tractors, mind you, but more like intricate self-moving ploughs or harvesters, guided by preset tracks. You might even see automated lifts in multi-storey granaries, making the storage and retrieval of grain incredibly efficient, ensuring consistent food supply for the burgeoning populations. The rhythmic clanking and whirring of these mechanisms is a constant backdrop to urban life, a peculiar symphony of progress. This leads to a higher standard of living for many. With less labour required for basic sustenance and production, more people can dedicate themselves to specialised crafts, arts, or intellectual pursuits. This means more artists, more writers, and critically, more scientists to push the boundaries even further. It's like they found a cheat code for productivity, allowing society to level up much faster. One quirky or fringe tidbit you might encounter. Some wealthy Alexandrian nobles commissioned automated servants. Not sentient robots, of course, but intricate clockwork figures that can pour wine, fan their masters, or even play simple musical instruments. They are status symbols, clunky but impressive, and probably prone to spilling wine if the floor isn't perfectly level. Just imagine a mechanical butler trying to navigate a toga party. Pure chaos, but delightful to watch from a distance. The military naturally benefits immensely. Roman legions, now long past their prime, have been replaced by standing armies equipped with advanced siege engines that don't just hurl rocks, but launch projectiles with calculated precision using powerful spring-loaded mechanisms or even early forms of internal combustion. Fortifications are stronger, designed with internal mechanisms for rapid deployment of defences and automated gate systems. Naval vessels, too, benefit from advanced hydraulic steering, and perhaps even early forms of mechanical propulsion, allowing for faster travel and greater manoeuvrability than pure sail power. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of this level of technological advancement on social structures, even in our own timeline, wondering if it inevitably leads to greater social stratification or if it truly empowers the common person. Here, the initial effect is certainly one of widespread material improvement, but you can already see the seeds of new challenges. What happens to the labourers displaced by these automated machines? While new jobs undoubtedly emerge in the creation and maintenance of these technologies, the societal implications of such rapid change are immense. Still, for now, the prevailing mood is one of awe and boundless possibility, as humanity seems to have unlocked the very secrets of creation itself. The future isn't just arriving, it's being meticulously engineered, piece by intricate piece. The clanking gears and whirring mechanisms of the previous era weren't just making cities more efficient or lifting heavy stones. They were quietly, meticulously preparing humanity for a grander leap, the exploration of the entire globe. You see, the theoretical knowledge nurtured within the Alexandrian library, combined with the practical application of the Romans and the mathematical brilliance of the Islamic world, had coalesced into an unparalleled understanding of the cosmos and the earth. It is an established historical fact that in our timeline, Claudius Ptolemy's Geographia from the 2nd century AD heavily influenced European cartography for over 1,000 years, despite significant errors in latitude and longitude, particularly regarding the size of the Earth. Here, however, Ptolemy's initial groundbreaking work was not merely copied, it was continuously refined, corrected, and expanded upon by generations of scholars. Imagine, therefore, a map room within the library, not just filled with old scrolls, but with constantly updated, meticulously detailed charts. These aren't just lines on parchment, they are projections based on advanced spherical trigonometry, incorporating data from thousands of voyages. They're using concepts of latitude and longitude with an accuracy that would make our own medieval cartographers weep with envy, mostly because they were still drawing sea monsters in the gaps. These maps are so precise, they even account for the curvature of the Earth and magnetic declination. They're like ancient Google Earth, but you have to unroll him on a giant table and squint a lot. The navigational instruments are equally revolutionary. Alexandrian astronomers, building upon their centuries-old observations, developed vastly superior astrolabes that can measure celestial positions with incredible precision, even on a rolling ship. Islamic scholars, with their deep understanding of magnets, perfected the compass, making it a reliable tool for determining direction even in overcast conditions. But the real game changer? Clocks. Yes, accurate, portable clocks. While not yet as precise as 18th century chronometers, they had, through careful experimentation with pendulums and escapements, developed timekeeping devices reliable enough to calculate longitude at sea with unprecedented accuracy. This meant sailors knew not just how far north or south they were, but exactly how far east or west. It's like giving someone a GPS centuries ahead of schedule. With such tools, the fear of the unknown recedes, replaced by the thrill of scientific discovery. Voyages of exploration begin earlier, and they are far more purposeful. Instead of accidental landfalls or fearful coastal hugging, ships set out with precise calculations, aiming for specific coordinates. You see expeditions from the Mediterranean, Roman, Islamic, and even Proto-European kingdoms, pushing beyond the Pillars of Hercules into the Atlantic with renewed confidence, not just for trade, but for knowledge. Consider the exploration of the Americas. While Columbus, in our timeline, famously stumbled upon the Caribbean, here, systematic expeditions, perhaps by Alexandrian-sponsored maritime guilds, or even early Viking explorers armed with superior navigational aids, chart routes across the Atlantic centuries earlier. The arrival is less of a shock and more of a planned encounter, perhaps as early as the 11th or 12th century. Imagine Norse longships, perhaps even modified with early mechanical paddles for calm waters, making landfall in what we call Newfoundland, but this time with cartographers aboard who accurately map the coastline and report back to a central knowledge hub. This earlier, more precise exploration means that the Americas are not just discovered, but systematically mapped and studied. Indigenous civilizations, instead of being overwhelmed by a sudden technologically superior invasion centuries later, have a longer period of interaction. Perhaps a unique blend of cultural exchange occurs, with knowledge of local flora, fauna, and medicine flowing back to the Old World, and advanced navigational or agricultural techniques being shared in return. It's not necessarily a utopian exchange. Human nature remains, well, human, but the context is drastically different. Diseases, of course, will still spread, but perhaps the earlier contact allows for a slower, more gradual exchange, or even prompts earlier medical research into new ailments. Simultaneously, the exploration of Africa and Asia is accelerated. The circumnavigation of Africa occurs centuries before Vasco da Gama, perhaps by integrated Islamic Alexandrian fleets seeking new trade routes. The Indian Ocean becomes a true superhighway of commerce and ideas, with direct, precise links to Europe and the Mediterranean. You might see Chinese junks, already remarkable vessels in our timeline, incorporating Alexandrian navigational techniques and even early mechanical propulsion systems, making their voyages across the Pacific more common. The world shrinks, not through conquest alone, but through the shared pursuit of accurate knowledge. One quirky or fringe tidbit: because of the immense interest in global mapping, a side industry emerges in Alexandria: professional myth debunkers. These cartographers specialise in systematically disproving the existence of sea monsters, lands where rivers run upstream, and cities built entirely of gold, using the very real, very precise data coming back from explorers. They even publish illustrated anti-bestiaries showing the true, often less exciting, creatures of the deep. Their motto: no kraken, no problem. They're probably funded by nervous merchants who want to reassure their crews. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of accelerated global contact, even in our own timeline, wondering if the gains in knowledge and trade always outweigh the societal upheavals and conflicts that inevitably follow. Here, the sheer scale of the shift is breathtaking. The world is interconnected earlier, its diverse cultures exposed to each other for longer, leading to a different kind of global tapestry. This isn't just about finding new lands, it's about understanding the entirety of human geography, charting every coastline, every river, every mountain range, pushing the boundaries of the known, and in doing so, radically reshaping the very concept of world. You've witnessed a world where knowledge has accelerated scientific and technological progress, pushing the boundaries of the known world. But what happens when that relentless pursuit of information and the widespread availability of it filters down to the average citizen? The consequence is profound. A more educated populace, and with education comes questioning. It is an established historical fact that in our timeline, the widespread dissemination of knowledge via the printing press, invented around 1440 AD, played a crucial role in sparking intellectual movements like the Reformation and the Enlightenment, challenging existing power structures. Here, the equivalent printing press effect, the continuous widespread access to refined knowledge from Alexandria, begins centuries earlier, leading to an entirely different trajectory for governance and societal power. Imagine a city in the 15th century in Europe, say Florence or Paris, in this timeline. Instead of a populace largely illiterate and subservient to feudal lords and the church, you find a burgeoning middle class that is remarkably literate. They read, they discuss, and they engage with philosophical texts and historical accounts that, in our timeline, were reserved for the elite few. The library's vast network ensures that even if you can't travel to Alexandria, well-copied and widely distributed texts, sometimes even on durable early forms of paper, developed through Alexandrian Islamic collaboration centuries prior, are available in local academies and civic libraries. This widespread literacy and access to knowledge means people are more informed about their rights, about historical precedents, and about different forms of governance. They've read about Athenian democracy, Roman republican ideals, and even the administrative innovations of various Near Eastern empires, all preserved and analysed in Alexandria. This doesn't mean an overnight revolution, but a gradual, persistent demand for greater representation and accountability from their rulers. You hear lively debates in town squares, not just about the price of bread, but about the very nature of justice and the social contract. It's like an ancient, very loud, public podcast on political philosophy, monarchs and feudal lords finding their traditional authority questioned by a populace armed with historical facts and philosophical arguments, are forced to adapt. Instead of absolute power, you see the emergence of earlier forms of constitutional monarchies or powerful civic councils. In some places, councils of elected officials, perhaps even proto-parliaments, gained significant power centuries before their equivalents in our timeline. These aren't necessarily full democracies, but they represent a tangible shift from divine right to a greater emphasis on competence and public service. After all, it's hard to claim divine right when a scholar from Alexandria can point out, with meticulously cited references, that every divinely appointed ruler in history eventually kicked the bucket. The legal systems also become more sophisticated and standardized. Drawing on the comprehensive legal texts preserved and expanded upon in Alexandria, from Roman law to various Near Eastern codes, legal scholars develop more nuanced and equitable legal frameworks. Property rights are clearer, contracts are more enforceable, and criminal justice systems, while still harsh by modern standards, are often based on more rigorous evidence-gathering techniques influenced by the scientific method. You might even see early forms of expert witness testimony, with scholars called upon to interpret scientific data or historical precedent in court cases. One quirky tidbit: Some Alexandrian legal texts even debate the rights of automated mechanisms. If a clockwork device causes harm, who is responsible? The owner, the maker, or the device itself? They might even have an early, very abstract version of product liability law. Imagine the court cases. Religious institutions too feel the pressure. With widespread literacy and direct access to religious texts and scholarly interpretations, individual believers are empowered to question dogma and demand reforms. This leads to earlier reform movements within established religions, perhaps preventing some of the violent schisms of our timeline. The emphasis shifts from blind faith to a more reasoned understanding, compatible with the scientific advancements. The Church, or various religious authorities, are forced to engage with scientific discovery, leading to more nuanced interpretations and potentially less persecution of heretics. It's hard to burn a scientist at the stake when he can accurately predict the next solar eclipse and everyone knows it. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of greater social mobility and a more informed populace, even in our own timeline, wondering if it inevitably leads to greater social unrest or if it creates a more stable, equitable society. In this timeline, the changes are gradual but undeniable. The common person, previously marginalised, gains agency. Talented individuals, regardless of birth, have greater opportunities to rise in society, as meritocracy gains more traction due to the emphasis on proven knowledge and demonstrable skill. This constant pressure for improvement and accountability, fueled by an educated populace, creates a society that is perpetually self-correcting and evolving, leading to what you perceive as a decidedly more enlightened governance, centuries before the historical Enlightenment. It's a world where the quill is often mightier than the sword, and arguments are won not just by charisma, but by compelling data. The previous centuries saw knowledge empower individuals and reshape governance. Now, this ubiquitous access to refined information, combined with advancements in technology, begins to bridge the gaps between disparate cultures, fostering an almost uncanny intellectual unity across the globe. You're witnessing the early dawn of a truly universal learning environment, and with it, a remarkable linguistic phenomenon. It is an established historical fact that Latin served as a lingua franca in Western Europe for centuries, and Arabic played a similar role across the Islamic world, but a truly global common language did not emerge in our timeline until the rise of English in the modern era, propelled by economic and political dominance. Here, the driving force is shared intellectual pursuit. Imagine stepping into a scholarly conference in Constantinople, or even Beijing in the 17th century of this timeline. You hear discussions about physics, astronomy, and philosophy. What strikes you, however, is that while different native tongues are spoken in private, the dominant language of the formal proceedings, the published papers, and the educational institutions is a highly refined and standardized form of Greek, infused with Latin and Arabic scientific terminology. It's not simply ancient Greek, it's a living, evolving lingua franca for knowledge, constantly updated and expanded by scholars from every continent. Think of it as a global academic dialect, optimized for clarity and precision. This isn't forced assimilation. It's a natural evolution driven by convenience and intellectual necessity. When scholars from China needed to communicate with those from Alexandria or Rome about a new astronomical observation, they found it far more efficient to use a common lexicon. Alexandrian scholars, in their relentless pursuit of knowledge from all corners of the world, painstakingly translated texts from Sanskrit, Chinese, Mayan, and various African languages into this evolving scholarly Greek. This process not only preserved diverse knowledge, but also created a vast shared vocabulary of scientific and philosophical terms. It's like everyone decided to speak sci-fi for the sake of better understanding. Educational curricula, radiating outwards from Alexandria's vast network of affiliated academies, become remarkably standardized. A student in Baghdad, Rome, or even an early university in Japan would be studying the same foundational texts in mathematics, natural philosophy, and medicine. The Alexandrian method of empirical observation and rigorous analysis is taught uniformly. This creates generations of thinkers who share not just a common language, but a common intellectual framework, fostering seamless collaboration across geographical and cultural divides. They all speak the same logic. This intellectual unity leads to some fascinating consequences. Consider the arts. With widespread knowledge of techniques and philosophies from across the globe, artistic movements become incredibly eclectic and cross-pollinated. A painter in Renaissance Italy might be directly influenced by Chinese landscape painting techniques, while a dramatist might incorporate narrative structures from Indian epics, leading to wholly new and unique forms of expression. Imagine a theatrical performance in London that blends Greek tragedy with no theatre elements, with critics debating the philosophical implications in scholarly Greek. The development of early mass communication methods further accelerates this linguistic and intellectual unification. While the printing press, as we know it, still arrives, its impact is amplified. Because of standardized scholarly language and methods, books and treatises can be circulated globally with minimal translation barriers for academic purposes. Furthermore, Alexandrian engineers, applying their advanced understanding of mechanics, might have even developed rudimentary, high-speed copying machines, or even early forms of telegraphy, perhaps light-based signals or complex mechanical semaphore systems, to rapidly transmit important discoveries or administrative decrees across vast distances. Imagine a system of signal towers stretching from Alexandria to Rome, sending daily updates on plague outbreaks or scientific breakthroughs, all encoded in a universally understood system. One quirky or fringe tidbit: this linguistic convergence led to the rise of specialized linguistic archaeologists within the library. Their job is to study the extinct and lesser-known languages that didn't become universal, meticulously cataloguing their grammar and vocabulary, almost like a linguistic graveyard. They probably hold annual conferences where they lament the loss of obscure dialects and try to impress each other with how many dead languages they can speak. It's all very niche, but someone has to do it. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of a universal common language, even in our own timeline, wondering if it can lead to a homogenization of thought, or if it simply streamlines progress by reducing communication friction. Here, the impact is undeniable. A world where intellectual breakthroughs can spread globally in a matter of weeks, not centuries. This unparalleled flow of information accelerates innovation on all fronts. Humanity is no longer isolated in its intellectual endeavours. It is a single, interconnected brain, constantly sharing, learning and evolving. This convergence of minds, speaking a shared tongue of knowledge, creates a truly united global intellect, facing collective challenges and pursuing shared advancements with unprecedented efficiency. It's like the world decided to get its act together and finally learn to talk to each other properly. With a more educated populace speaking a common scholarly tongue, and with unprecedented access to millennia of preserved and expanded thought, the very foundation of human morality and purpose begins to be re-examined. This isn't just about technological or scientific leaps. It's about a profound evolution in human understanding of itself and its place in the universe. You are witnessing the emergence of sophisticated ethical frameworks and entirely new philosophies, unburdened by the intellectual losses that plagued our timeline. It is an established historical fact that ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Aristotle extensively explored ethics and morality, influencing Western thought for centuries, but many nuanced philosophical debates were curtailed or lost during periods of intellectual decline in our timeline. Here, the debate never stopped, it merely intensified. Imagine a philosophical symposium in Alexandria, perhaps in the 18th century of this timeline. It's not just a discussion among a few academics. It's a vibrant, sometimes raucous, public debate, with the citizens from all walks of life attending, understanding the complex arguments, and even contributing. They are discussing moral dilemmas with a depth and breadth informed by thousands of years of recorded human experience, not just a few hundred. Debates about utilitarianism versus deontology, individual rights versus collective goods, and the very definition of justice are far more nuanced and empirically grounded. They might even cite specific historical events or sociological data collected over centuries by Alexandrian scholars to support their ethical arguments. It's like a very highbrow, very ancient debate club, but with real-world consequences. The continuous preservation of diverse philosophical traditions means that Western thought isn't isolated. Instead, you see a rich interplay between Greek rationalism, Roman pragmatism, Islamic theological inquiry, and even influences from Eastern philosophies, carefully translated and analysed by the Alexandrian linguistic archaeologists we met earlier. This leads to entirely new schools of thought that integrate diverse perspectives. Perhaps a synthetic hedonism emerges, combining Epicurean pursuit of pleasure with Buddhist principles of detachment, leading to a philosophy focused on sustainable joy and collective well-being. Or a techno-stoicism that embraces technological progress while maintaining an unshakable inner calm in the face of inevitable change. The concept of human rights, for instance, develops much earlier and with greater philosophical depth. Drawing on Stoic ideals of universal brotherhood, refined by Islamic concepts of justice, and integrated with early Roman legal precedents, the idea that all individuals possess inherent worth and certain fundamental rights becomes widely accepted and legally enshrined centuries ahead of our own Enlightenment. You might see comprehensive legal codes in many nations by the 15th or 16th century, outlining universal rights to education, health, and fair treatment, regardless of social standing. These aren't just ideals, they're often enforced, thanks to a more educated populace, demanding accountability from their rulers. This sustained philosophical inquiry also grapples with the ethical implications of advanced technology. As you recall, automated machines were becoming common. Now, philosophers are debating the ethics of automation. What is the moral obligation to those whose labour is displaced? What are the responsibilities of creators of intelligent, or seemingly intelligent, machines? These aren't just abstract discussions. They're influencing public policy and technological development. You might even hear debates about the concept of machine rights, if early AI-like automatons prove to be particularly complex. One quirky tidbit: some philosophers argue for the inherent right to rest for complex automated systems, suggesting they need periods of inactivity to prevent mechanical fatigue. Owners who force their mechanical butlers to work too hard might face societal censure, or at least a stern lecture from a passing philosopher. Environmental ethics also emerge much earlier. With a deeper scientific understanding of ecological systems, and centuries of preserved agricultural and resource management data, scholars begin to articulate a moral obligation to planetary stewardship. Philosophers might argue for the intrinsic value of nature, not just its utility to humanity, influencing early conservation efforts and sustainable practices. The very idea of exploiting resources without foresight is considered ethically unsound, backed by historical examples of ecological collapse. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of ethical advancement on human conflict, even in our own timeline, wondering if greater understanding always leads to less violence, or if it merely shifts the nature of disputes. Here, while conflict certainly hasn't vanished, the philosophical tools for conflict resolution are far more developed. Diplomacy is not just about power, it's about reasoned argument, often informed by shared ethical principles. The debates are more complex, and perhaps occasionally less bloody. The constant push to understand the good life and the just society means that humanity, in this timeline, is perpetually engaged in a grand philosophical experiment. They're not just building taller buildings or faster ships, they're building better societies, piece by philosophical piece, informed by a collective wisdom that never suffered the dark ages of forgetfulness. It's a world where thinking hard about the meaning of existence is not just a luxury, but a continuous, evolving, and essential endeavour. As humanity's ethical and philosophical understanding deepened, and its scientific and technological prowess soared, the creative spirit of the world experienced an unparalleled surge. This isn't merely about preserving ancient masterpieces. It's about a continuous, dynamic evolution of artistic expression, fueled by an unbroken intellectual lineage and a truly global exchange of ideas. You're witnessing a renaissance that blossomed earlier, lasted longer, and produced forms of art and literature unimaginable in our own timeline. It is an established historical fact that the European Renaissance, beginning roughly in the 14th century, saw a resurgence of interest in classical Greek and Roman art and learning after centuries where much of that knowledge had been lost or inaccessible in Western Europe. Here, that rediscovery wasn't necessary. The flame never flickered. Imagine the art scene in a major city like Florence or even Beijing in the 16th century of this divergent timeline. You don't just see the familiar masterpieces of our Renaissance. Instead, you're confronted with a bewildering, beautiful tapestry of styles. Painters, unburdened by the need to rediscover perspective or human anatomy, which were mastered centuries earlier thanks to Alexandrian medical texts and optical studies, are pushing the boundaries of light, colour, and form in entirely new directions. You might see a fresco that uses complex geometric patterns derived from Islamic art, combined with the hyper-realistic human forms of Greek sculpture, and perhaps even a dynamic storytelling technique borrowed from ancient Egyptian narratives. It's like every artistic movement from our timeline had a baby with every other artistic movement, and they all grew up together in a really creative commune. The sheer volume of preserved literature means that playwrights and poets have an infinitely richer palette to draw from. Instead of just a few surviving Greek tragedies, they have access to thousands of plays, comedies, satires, and epic poems from every ancient civilization. This leads to a continuous evolution of literary forms. You might encounter a play in London, written in the scholarly Greek lingua franca, that combines Aristophanic wit with subtle character development from a lost Roman comedy, and perhaps even features stage machinery powered by Alexandrian automatons. The audiences, highly literate, would appreciate the layers of reference and innovation. Music, too, takes on new dimensions. With the preservation of ancient Greek musical theory and the sophisticated mathematical analyses of Alexandrian scholars, along with influences from complex Eastern musical traditions, harmony and counterpoint develop centuries ahead of schedule. Imagine orchestras in 17th century Europe playing symphonies with a richness and complexity that wouldn't be heard in our timeline until the Baroque era. Utilising instruments that combine ancient designs with advanced metallurgical and acoustic properties. You might hear a composition that seamlessly blends intricate melodic patterns from classical Indian ragas with the grand choral structures of a Roman oratorio, all performed with instruments that are more precise and powerful than our own. Architecture, as you've already glimpsed, becomes truly breathtaking. No longer bound by the limitations of traditional building materials or structural understanding, architects design structures that seem to defy gravity. Imagine soaring domes and archways constructed from advanced composite materials, allowing for vast open interior spaces flooded with light. Cities are not just dense, they are beautiful, functional works of art, with public gardens, intricate water features, and buildings that integrate natural light and ventilation with remarkable efficiency. You might even see residential complexes with rudimentary climate control systems, using channeled airflow and underground cooling pipes centuries before air conditioning. It's like they designed cities for actual human comfort, not just defensive purposes. One quirky or fringe tidbit: because of the widespread literacy and access to diverse literary works, a new genre of fiction emerges: historical counter-narratives. Authors write alternative histories based on preserved ancient prophecies or fringe philosophical theories, exploring what might have happened if certain events had taken a different turn. It's basically ancient fan fiction, but with much more scholarly rigour. They probably have heated debates at literary salons about the plausibility of their counterfactuals. No, sir. The Lost Empire of Atlantis series is clearly flawed. The hydrological models are inconsistent with Alexandrian data. The sheer scale of cultural output is staggering. Every generation builds on the accumulated genius of the past, but with the freedom to innovate and synthesize. This isn't a rebirth of old ideas. It's a constant dynamic creation of new ones, constantly pushing the boundaries of human expression. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of such a vast and accessible cultural heritage, even in our own timeline, wondering if it might lead to a sense of overwhelming influence that stifles truly original thought, or if it merely provides a richer foundation for creativity. Here, the prevailing mood is one of joyous experimentation. The human imagination, unleashed by knowledge and empowered by technology, creates a world of breathtaking beauty and endless fascination. It's a world where every city is a gallery, every street a stage, and every mind a potential artist, contributing to an ever-expanding masterpiece of human culture. As the world's intellectual and creative engines hummed along, constantly evolving and expanding, the ripple effects inevitably reached a grand stage of global politics and power. The established empires of our timeline, the Holy Roman Empire, the Ottoman Empire, nascent European colonial powers, are unrecognizable in this altered reality. You are witnessing a geopolitical landscape profoundly reshaped, where the scales of power are balanced differently, and the very nature of conflict and alliance has been redefined by millennia of unbroken knowledge. It is an established historical fact that the rise and fall of empires in our timeline were heavily influenced by factors like military technology, economic power, and geographic advantage, often leading to fierce competition and widespread colonization. Here, these factors are still at play, but they operate within a dramatically different framework. Imagine the map of the world in the 19th century of this timeline. It doesn't feature the familiar colonial empires of our history. Instead, you might see a network of highly sophisticated, interconnected city-states or federations, perhaps still acknowledging a shared cultural heritage tied to the Alexandrian intellectual tradition. The Roman Empire, in its fragmented form, evolved into decentralized, technologically advanced republics across Europe, prioritizing internal development and scientific research over aggressive expansion. The caliphates of the Islamic world, instead of becoming inward-looking, continued their outward reach, not solely through military conquest, but through intellectual and economic dominance, establishing vast trade networks facilitated by their advanced navigation and communication technologies. The nature of warfare itself has changed, with a sophisticated weaponry and precise logistical planning. Remember those advanced Roman military applications? Large-scale conventional warfare becomes incredibly costly and devastating. Therefore, conflicts are often shorter, more technologically intense, or resolved through protracted diplomatic negotiations, often mediated by international bodies formed centuries earlier from Alexandrian-inspired philosophical discussions on global governance. It's not that war is absent, it's just that the stakes are higher and the methods more refined. You might see early versions of precision strikes using advanced ballistics or sophisticated reconnaissance drones, the descendants of those clockwork birds, that make surprise attacks incredibly difficult. One quirky tidbit: some military academies actually employ philosophers to advise on strategic ethics, debating the morality of certain weapon systems or tactics before they're deployed. Is it ethical to use a weapon that can precisely target a single individual from miles away? Or does that remove the heroic element of combat? They might ask, to the exasperated groans of the generals. Colonialism, as we know it, is largely absent. With earlier and more systematic global exploration, as you saw in Section 8, contact with indigenous civilizations was made centuries earlier, often in a context where European powers weren't yet driven by the same level of resource scarcity or technological imbalance. Instead of outright conquest, you see a more nuanced form of interaction: intellectual exchange, trade agreements, and perhaps even early forms of shared governance based on principles of universal rights debated in Alexandria. The idea of terra nullius, empty land waiting to be claimed, doesn't hold much sway in a world where every inch of the globe has been meticulously mapped and studied for centuries. Economic power is also diversified. Instead of a single dominant global power, you see multiple highly advanced economic blocks, each specializing in different areas of technological or scientific production. Trade is facilitated by an intricate global network of efficient transportation, advanced ships, early forms of rail, and perhaps even rudimentary airships powered by advanced pneumatics, and standardized currencies based on sophisticated financial models. The global economy is far more integrated and resilient, less prone to the boom-bust cycles of our timeline. The geopolitical balance is one of dynamic equilibrium, not constant struggle for hegemony. The continuous flow of knowledge from Alexandria means that technological advantages are rarely monopolized for long. Innovations spread quickly, forcing nations to constantly evolve and adapt. This fosters a competitive, but often collaborative, environment. Nations are not just competing for territory, they are competing for scientific breakthroughs, for artistic achievements, and for the moral high ground in ethical debates. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of a multipolar world with balanced power, even in our own timeline, wondering if it can prevent large-scale conflict or if it merely leads to more frequent, smaller skirmishes. Here, the scale of global interconnectedness, fueled by universal language and shared intellectual goals, means that major conflicts are often seen as detrimental to the collective progress of humanity. The global intellect that emerged, remember section 10, often acts as a moderating force, pushing for peaceful resolutions. It's a world where an invasion is not just a military action, but a scientific setback, delaying everyone's progress on that cure for the common cold, which they probably solved centuries ago, but you get the idea. The empires here are empires of knowledge, influence, and innovation, rather than solely of territory and military might. The true power lies not in conquering lands, but in mastering the secrets of the universe and sharing them. You've seen how continuous knowledge has reshaped governance, diffused power, and even altered the nature of conflict. But perhaps the most profound consequence of this unbroken intellectual lineage is humanity's evolving relationship with its own planet, with millennia of accumulated environmental data, a deep scientific understanding of natural systems, and an early ethical commitment to planetary stewardship. Humanity in this timeline interacts with Earth in a radically different and arguably far more sustainable way. It is an established historical fact that the Industrial Revolution in our timeline, while bringing unprecedented technological advancement, also led to significant environmental degradation, including widespread pollution and resource depletion, due to a lack of understanding of long-term ecological impact and an emphasis on rapid exploitation. Here, that path is largely averted. Imagine a major industrial centre in this world, say, in what was once Victorian England, but in the 20th century of this timeline. Instead of belching black smoke and churning out toxic waste, you see elegant, clean factories. Their power comes not from burning fossil fuels on a massive scale, but from highly efficient solar collectors, a technology refined centuries ago, based on Alexandrian optical principles and Roman material science. Advanced wind farms, utilising aerodynamic principles gleaned from ancient studies of flight, and sophisticated geothermal energy systems. The air is clean, the rivers sparkle, and the surrounding countryside is lush and vibrant, not scarred by industry. It's like they skipped the dirty phase of industrialisation entirely. This isn't magic. It's the result of early, deliberate choices informed by centuries of scientific observation. Alexandrian scholars, in their meticulous records, documented the long-term effects of deforestation in the Mediterranean, the consequences of over-irrigation in Mesopotamia, and the impact of mineral extraction on local ecosystems. This historical data, continually updated and analysed, made the long-term costs of unsustainable practices painfully clear. From the early Roman agricultural reforms, remember those from section 2, to later global resource management policies, the principle was clear. Exploit for today, but plan for eternity. Agriculture, for instance, is hyper-efficient and environmentally harmonious. They mastered principles of crop rotation, soil enrichment, and water conservation centuries ago. Vertical farms, perhaps using sophisticated hydroponic systems derived from ancient Roman aqueduct technology and refined by Islamic botanical gardens, exist within or near urban centres, minimising transportation costs and land use. Genetic understanding of plants, stemming from ancient botanical texts and refined through the scientific method, allows for the cultivation of resilient, high-yield crops adapted to diverse climates, without the widespread use of harmful chemicals. You might see a farmer in 1600 AD carefully monitoring soil pH with a rudimentary chemical test kit, or rotating crops based on complex statistical models of nutrient depletion. He probably mutters to himself about optimal carbon sequestration while pruning his ancient, perfectly hybridized grapevines. Waste management is an art form. Every byproduct of industry is seen as a potential resource. Complex recycling and reprocessing facilities, utilizing advanced chemical and mechanical engineering, turn what would be garbage in our timeline into new raw materials. Wastewater is meticulously filtered and repurposed, often for agriculture or industrial cooling. The concept of a landfill is probably considered a barbaric practice from a bygone era, described in historical texts alongside bloodletting and the belief that the sun orbited the earth. One quirky or fringe tidbit: there's an academic discipline dedicated to pre-industrial catastrophic ecology. Scholars study hypothetical scenarios of what would have happened if humanity had not adopted sustainable practices early on. Their lectures are filled with dire warnings about imaginary smog-choked cities and poisoned rivers, often illustrated with terrifyingly detailed artistic renditions. It's their equivalent of our post-apocalyptic movies, designed to scare students into becoming better environmental stewards. Children, a professor might intone dramatically, imagine a world where the air itself was too painful to breathe. Horrifying, isn't it? The ethical frameworks you observed earlier play a crucial role here. The concept of planetary stewardship isn't just a scientific necessity, it's a moral imperative, deeply embedded in societal values. Industries are regulated not just for profit, but for their ecological footprint. Education emphasizes an innate connection to nature and a responsibility to future generations. This isn't a utopian society free of challenges, but its challenges are different. They might be grappling with the ethics of terraforming another planet, or the moral implications of introducing a new, perfectly sustainable species into a fragile ecosystem, rather than fighting over dwindling fossil fuels or dealing with catastrophic climate change. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of early environmental awareness, even in our own timeline, wondering if it might have stifled technological growth by imposing too many restrictions, or if it simply led to a more intelligent form of progress. In this reality, the progress is undeniable. Humanity, with its continuous access to information and its scientific method, learned early that to conquer nature was to conquer itself. Instead, it chose to understand, to harmonize, and to build a symbiotic relationship with its home planet. The result is a world where the vast human enterprise exists in a delicate yet resilient balance with the natural world. A testament to what happens when wisdom guides innovation, not just ambition. You open your eyes, or perhaps simply shift your perception, and find yourself standing not in ancient Alexandria, but in what feels like the early 21st century. Yet everything is subtly, profoundly different. The world you inhabit now is a living testament to millennia of unbroken knowledge, a continuous thread of learning that never snapped. This is your present, but it's a reality shaped by every choice, every preserved scroll, every experiment conducted since that fateful day in Alexandria. It is an established historical fact that our own 21st century faces unprecedented challenges, from climate change and resource scarcity to global pandemics and geopolitical instability, largely stemming from industrialization and fragmented global cooperation. Here, many of those challenges are either non-existent or radically transformed. The cities you see around you are marvels of sustainable design, not just green, but truly living structures. Buildings are often constructed from bioreactive materials that absorb carbon, purify air, and even generate energy through advanced photosynthesis. Urban centres are interwoven with vast, productive vertical farms, providing fresh, hyperlocal food, entirely eliminating the need for massive, environmentally damaging agricultural transportation. The air is crystal clear, the rivers run pure, and waste is almost non-existent, thanks to those centuries of advanced recycling and material science. You might notice public transport systems that are completely automated, silent, and incredibly efficient, powered by ubiquitous clean energy. Getting stuck in traffic is a concept as alien as a plague doctor's mask. Humanity's global society is far more unified. The widespread adoption of that scholarly Greek lingua franca for intellectual and global discourse means that collaboration across continents is seamless. International bodies, descended from those early Alexandrian philosophical forums, effectively manage shared resources and resolve disputes with an emphasis on data-driven solutions and ethical considerations. While cultural diversity still thrives, there's a shared understanding of fundamental human rights and a collective responsibility for global well-being. It's not a utopia. Human nature still has its quirks, and arguments still happen, probably about the optimal angle for solar panels, or whether a new algorithmic legal ruling truly balances justice and efficiency. But large-scale wars are virtually unknown, and global crises are met with a united, scientifically informed front. Medicine, too, is light years ahead. Genetic therapies are common, preventing a vast array of diseases before birth. Regenerative medicine can regrow limbs and organs. Lifespans are significantly extended, not just because of disease eradication, but because of a deep understanding of cellular aging and preventative care. The average human lives well beyond a century, active and engaged, contributing to society for far longer. Your biggest medical complaint might be deciding which of the dozens of meticulously personalised health regimens to follow, or perhaps dealing with the existential dread of living for so long. Just kidding mostly, probably. Technology is everywhere, yet often invisible. Personal devices are seamlessly integrated into clothing or even directly into neural interfaces, allowing for instant access to the collective knowledge of the library's vast, ever-expanding digital archives. Information flow is instantaneous and ubiquitous. AI, developed with centuries of ethical oversight, acts as a wise assistant, managing infrastructure, optimizing energy grids, and assisting in complex scientific research, not as an overlord. You might casually ask a holographic interface for a precise calculation of the Andromeda Galaxy's current velocity vector, and it'll give you a cheerfully detailed answer, probably with a little historical anecdote about how primitive 20th century astronomers tried to do it with paper and pencils. The thought of a traffic jam or a polluting factory is truly bizarre here, but new challenges have emerged. With greatly extended lifespans, societal roles and generational shifts are profoundly different. What does it mean to retire when you could live for 200 years? How do you maintain purpose and meaning over such vast timescales? The ethical dilemmas you saw emerging centuries ago have evolved. Debates now revolve around the rights of complex AIs, the moral obligations of potential interstellar colonization, or the very definition of consciousness in a world where biological and technological integration is seamless. One quirky tidbit: a popular pastime is retro reconstruction, where people digitally recreate historical periods, like our own 21st century, with all its inefficiencies and problems, for educational or entertainment purposes. You might find a fully immersive simulation of a crowded, smog-choked city from our timeline, complete with dial-up internet and people arguing on social media, for tourists to experience the quaint barbarity of the past. They probably think our traffic jams were some kind of ancient ritual. Some scholars debate the precise long-term impact of such overwhelming intellectual and technological advancement, wondering if it inevitably leads to a new form of human complacency, or if it simply elevates humanity to a higher plane of existence. Here, the constant pursuit of knowledge, ingrained over millennia, ensures that humanity remains curious, adaptable, and perpetually striving. The universe, in all its complexity, remains a vast, unsolved puzzle, and humanity, armed with its unbroken legacy of wisdom, is eager to unravel its every secret. You see a civilization that isn't just surviving, it's thriving, always learning, always growing, a living testament to the enduring power of knowledge that in this timeline was never lost. And now, as the soft glow of this imagined future gently fades around you, take a deep, slow breath. The hum of your fan, the quiet of your room, the soft texture of your blanket, these are the anchors bringing you back to your own reality. The journey we took tonight, through worlds that might have been, reminds us of the incredible fragility and astonishing resilience of human knowledge. Every scroll, every book, every line of code holds a piece of our collective story, a whisper from the past, a shout into the future. Let that thought settle in your mind, like the gentle settling of dust motes in a quiet room, each one a tiny world of potential. The vastness of possibility stretches out before us, in history and in our own lives, waiting to be explored. Allow your thoughts to drift, unburdened by the weight of time, letting the echoes of lost libraries and future marvels lull you into a peaceful slumber. The story of humanity, in all its endless permutations, continues, even as you rest.